The sun of Eldoria rose over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the lush landscape. The once divided camp was now a bustling hive of activity, with humans and Eldorians working side by side. The air was filled with a mix of languages and the sounds of preparation, creating a symphony of unity that was both fragile and hopeful. Captain Alex Morgan stood on a makeshift platform, surveying the scene. He felt a pang of pride and a touch of apprehension as he watched his people mingling with the Eldorians. The truce was new, the alliance fragile, but the potential for a united front against Thrakos was undeniable. "Captain!" a voice called from behind. Alex turned to see Lyra, the Eldorian warrior and diplomat, approaching. Her ice-blue eyes, filled with determination, met his. "Our people are ready for the joint training session. Are yours?" Alex nodded. "They are. It's time to show them that we can work together. Let's begin." The training ground was a large, open area flanked by towering trees and the distant peaks of Eldoria's mountains. Eldorian warriors and human soldiers stood in formation, eyeing each other warily. The tension was palpable, a thin veneer over the underlying mistrust. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying authority and grace. "Warriors of Eldoria, today we stand with new allies. These humans have come seeking refuge, but also to fight alongside us against a greater threat. We must learn from each other if we are to survive Thrakos' onslaught." Alex joined her, his voice firm and commanding. "Soldiers, we've faced many challenges, but this is unlike any we've encountered. These Eldorians are our allies now. Their knowledge and skills are invaluable. Today, we train together as one force, united in purpose." The first exercise involved a basic combat drill, designed to foster cooperation and build trust. Human soldiers demonstrated their firearm techniques, while Eldorians showcased their mastery of traditional weaponry and close combat skills. The initial awkwardness slowly gave way to mutual respect as each side recognized the strengths of the other. In one corner of the training ground, Alex watched as Corporal David Perez, one of his best marksmen, teamed up with an Eldorian archer named Kyle. The contrast was stark, Perez with his modern rifle and Kyle with a sleek, elegant bow. Yet, as they exchanged techniques, a bond began to form. "Your bow is impressive," Perez admitted, watching Kyle's arrow hit a distant target with pinpoint accuracy. "But can it match the speed of this?" He raised his rifle and fired a shot that struck the bullseye in an instant. Kyle nodded appreciatively. "Speed, yes. But the bow is silent, an advantage in stealth. Perhaps together we can combine speed and silence." Nearby, Lieutenant Sarah Connor was sparring with an Eldorian warrior named Thalrin. Their duel was a dance of contrasting styles, Sarah's aggressive, disciplined strikes against Thalrin's fluid, evasive movements. As they fought, they began to anticipate each other's moves, finding a rhythm that blended their techniques. "You fight well, human," Thalrin said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips as he parried one of Sarah's strikes. "You are strong and determined." Sarah grinned, stepping back and lowering her weapon. "And you are swift and precise." As the day progressed, the barriers between the two species began to crumble. Joint exercises in strategy and tactics followed the combat drills, with both sides sharing their knowledge of Thrakos' forces and possible countermeasures. The exchange of information was vital, revealing gaps in each other's understanding and providing new perspectives on the impending threat. During a break, Alex and Lyra walked among their people, offering encouragement and guidance. They paused near a group huddled around a holographic map, discussing potential battle strategies. "This could work," an Eldorian strategist mused, pointing to a weak point in Thrakos' formation. "If we combine our stealth units with your firepower, we could launch a surprise attack here." A human officer nodded in agreement, "And our engineers could rig traps along this route, slowing their advance and giving us a tactical advantage." Alex turned to Lyra, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and realism. "It's amazing to see them working together like this, but we still have a long way to go." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch both reassuring and firm. "Unity is not built in a day, Alex. But today, we've taken a crucial step, Trust will come with time and shared victories. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the training ground, a sense of camaraderie began to take root. The day's efforts had sown the seeds of trust and cooperation. The once divided camp now shared stories, meals, and a common purpose. Alex stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the unified forces. He felt a sense of cautious optimism. There would be challenges ahead, but today had shown that humans and Eldorians could stand together. Tomorrow, he murmured to himself, we face Thrakos. Lyra joined him, her gaze steady. Together, we will prevail. Under the starry sky of Eldoria, two species, once at odds, found a glimmer of hope in their shared struggle. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time, they faced it as allies, united in their fight for survival and a new dawn. The cold darkness of space seemed almost serene compared to the tense atmosphere aboard the human flagship. The Vanguard. Captain Alex Morgan paced the command center, his gaze alternating between the star-strewn void outside and the array of screens displaying strategic data. The Alliance's first real test loomed ominously, a direct confrontation with Thrakos' advancing forces, which were now only hours from striking the strategic point known as the Broken Ridges on Eldoria. Lyra, her expression unreadable, stood beside Alex, her eyes also fixed on the screens. Her presence as an Eldorian warrior and diplomat was both a symbol of the fragile union and a practical necessity for its success. The Broken Ridges, a series of jagged, mineral-rich mountains, held significant tactical importance, and losing it to Thrakos could mean losing the planet. The war room buzzed with low, urgent conversations, as officers from both species coordinated their units. Alex finally stopped pacing and addressed his team, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about holding ground," he said. "It's about showing that we stand better together, humans and Eldorians, as one force." Lyra nodded, stepping forward to add her voice, her tone equally resolute. "Our ancestors fought on these lands against great beasts to claim it as home," she spoke, her voice carrying through the room. "Today, we fight not to claim, but to protect our home from those who wish to ravage it." As the Allied forces prepared, a sense of solidarity started to replace the initial mistrust. Human and Eldorian soldiers, once hesitant allies, now shared nods and words of encouragement. They checked each other's equipment and exchanged small tokens representing their cultures, a sign of growing camaraderie. The fleets mobilized at dawn, the sky on Eldoria turning a brilliant orange, reflecting off the sleek metallic surfaces of human ships and the more organic, carved armors of the Eldorian crafts. The combined fleet moved into position, creating a formidable line of defense above the ridges. The first sign of the enemy was a low hum that grew into a cacophony of roars as Thrakos' ships broke through the atmosphere. The Eldorians ground, to air defense systems lit up, sending streaks of light soaring into the sky, while human pilots maneuvered their fighters with precision, cutting sharp lines across the blue expanse. The battle began with ferocious intensity. Thrakos' forces were relentless, their weapons devastating. The Allied defense held, but it was clear that every minute was bought with sweat and blood. Explosions dotted the landscape, casting plumes of earth and fire into the sky. Ground troops engaged in fierce combat, the air thick with the sounds of gunfire, shouts, and the harsh cries of Eldorian battle calls. In the thick of the battle, a human tank unit, supported by Eldorian ground fighters, managed a daring offensive. They pushed through a critical pass in the ridges, cutting off a section of Thrakos' forces. The move was risky, exposing them to enemy fire from three sides. But the unit's commander, a young lieutenant named Kara Jensen, knew it was their best chance to turn the tide. Kara led the charge, her voice crackling over the comms, calling out targets and maneuvers. Beside her, an Eldorian fighter named Tharn wielded a plasma lance, a weapon of both elegance and deadly efficiency, taking down enemy drones that swooped too close. The battle raged for hours, neither side yielding. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the battlefield, a sudden silence fell. Thrakos' forces were retreating. The allied troops, exhausted, bloodied but unbeaten, let out a ragged cheer. They had held the line. Back aboard the Vanguard, Alex and Lyra watched the retreat. "Today we held," Alex said quietly, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "But this is just the beginning." Lyra placed a hand on his arm, her gaze steady. "And we will face it together," she affirmed, her voice not just promising alliance, but friendship. As night fell over Eldoria, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the flicker of hope that now united the hearts of those who had fought side by side, humans and Eldorians alike. Their shared victory was not just a strategic win, but testament to the potential of their newfound bond. The dawn was a sullen smear of grays and blood, orange streaks, a silent herald to the forthcoming storm of war on the jagged terrain of broken ridges. The land here twisted into sharp escarpments and deep gullies, an unforgiving battlefield that would soon test the fragile alliance between humans and Eldorians. Captain Alex Morgan stood with his boots dug into the gritty soil, his gaze sweeping across the amassed troops. Humans in their rugged armor juxtaposed against the sleek, bioluminescent suits of the Eldorians. Beside him, Lyra, her eyes reflecting the rising sun like twin sapphires, scanned the horizon. Her face was a mask of resolve, but Alex saw the tightness in her jaw, the silent concern for her people and his. The air was tense, filled with the electric anticipation of battle. Soldiers checked their weapons, exchanged nods of reassurance, and whispered final prayers. Drones buzzed overhead, their cameras whirring softly, sending real-time feeds back to command centers, where Eldorian tacticians and human strategists monitored every movement. "The scouts report that Thrakos' forces are less than an hour away," Lyra murmured, her voice barely carrying over the morning breeze. "He's not holding back anything. Expect heavy artillery and aerial assaults." Alex nodded, gripping the hilt of his sidearm. "Our troops are ready, Lyra. Your people's technology, our tactical experience. Thrakos won't find us easy prey." The first sound was a distant rumbling, like thunder rolling over the crests of far-off mountains. It grew steadily, a crescendo of impending chaos, until the horizon bloomed with explosions. Smoke plumed into the sky, and with it, the clarion call of war echoed across broken ridges. Positions. Alex's command cut through the tense air. Humans and Eldorians scrambled into defensive formations, interlocking their units with practiced precision. The ground vibrated underfoot. The enemy was upon them. Thrakos' vanguard appeared first, a tide of mech units that stormed the ridges with relentless fervor. Behind them, the dark silhouettes of armored carriers loomed, spitting out squads of heavily armed troops. Lyra's voice rang out, clear and commanding, directing her warriors. Eldorian archers, positioned on the high ground, unleashed a volley of energy arrows that cut through the sky like shooting stars, piercing the shields of the advancing mechs. Human artillery responded in kind, the booms of their cannons synchronizing with the pulsing blasts of Eldorian tech. The battlefield turned into a lethal dance of light and sound, destruction painting the ridges in hues of fire and shadow. The enemy pressed hard, their numbers overwhelming, but the Allied forces held their ground, their resolve steeled by the leadership of Alex and Lyra. The captain found himself shoulder to shoulder with Eldorian fighters, their alien features set in expressions of fierce determination. An explosion nearby sent a group of human soldiers flying, their cries piercing the cacophony of battle. Alex rushed to their aid, dragging a wounded man to the relative safety of a trench. Overhead, the sky darkened with enemy bombers, their bellies opening to release a deadly rain. "Air support!" Alex yelled into his comm, and almost instantly, the human jets roared into view, engaging the bombers in a fierce aerial dogfight. Below them, the battle raged on, neither side yielding. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the battlefield, a crucial moment came. The central ridge, a key position, was under threat of being overrun. Lyra, seeing the danger, gathered her elite guard. "This ridge falls, and the battle is lost," she declared, her voice carrying over the din. With a fierce cry, she led the charge, her energy sword aglow, cutting a swathe through the enemy ranks. Alex, rallying his troops, joined her, and together they pushed forward, a united front of human and Eldorian courage. The battle for Broken Ridges was brutal, a test of endurance and will. As the sun set, painting the sky with the colors of fire, the tide finally turned. Thrakos' forces, battered and demoralized, began to retreat, harried by the relentless vigor of the Alliance. As the enemy fled, Alex and Lyra stood together amidst the carnage, breathing heavily, their clothes stained with the ash and blood of a hard-won victory. Their eyes met, and a wordless understanding passed between them. Today, they had not just fought side by side. They had forged a bond in the fire of battle, a bond that would be the cornerstone of their continued resistance against Thrakos. As the stars began to appear in the twilight sky, the battlefield quieted, leaving only the echoing cries of the wounded and the mourning. Tonight, they would tend to their dead and heal their wounded. But tomorrow they would fight again, stronger and more united than ever, under the banner of their newfound alliance. The night shrouded Eldoria's twin moons in a thick veil of darkness, a fitting backdrop for what was to come. Captain Alex Morgan and Lyra, the Eldorian warrior princess, stood side by side aboard the human flagship, the Vanguard. Below them, the gentle hum of the engine melded with the tense murmur of the crew. This was the calm before the storm, the deep breath before the plunge. Tonight, they would infiltrate Thrakos' flagship, the heart of their enemy's fleet. The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. Thrakos' ship, the Dominator, was heavily fortified, bristling with the latest in both human and alien technology, pilfered from conquered worlds. It orbited Eldoria like a dark star, casting long shadows over the planet's hopeful horizon. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying the gravity of their mission. Lyra nodded, her ice-blue eyes reflecting a fierce determination. "For Eldoria, for Earth, for all we have fought for," she replied, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of her people. Their team was small, chosen for their skills and their courage. Human and Eldorian alike, they were the best of the best, each one aware that tonight's mission might be their last. They gathered in the briefing room, where Alex and Lyra went over the plane one last time. "We strike during the changing of the guard shift. Stealth is our ally," Alex explained, pointing to the holographic layout of the Dominator. "We land here in the auxiliary bay. It's less guarded, but still gives us access to the main corridors." Lyra took over, her finger tracing the path they would take. "Our goal is to reach the central command room. Thrakos will be there, overseeing the invasion efforts. We neutralize him, and the head of the snake is cut." The air was thick with resolve as they suited up. Each member donned a stealth suit, designed to dampen their thermal signatures and muffle any sounds. Silent as shadows, they boarded the stealth shuttle, a small, nimble craft that resembled more a sliver of night than a ship. The journey to the Dominator was fraught with tension. Space around them was a void, punctuated by the distant twinkling of starfire and the looming bulk of the enemy ship. As they approached, the sheer size of the Dominator became oppressively clear. It was a fortress among the stars, a monument to tyranny. Lyra's hand found Alex's in the dim light, their fingers intertwined, a silent promise exchanged in the dark, a promise to protect, to persevere, to prevail. They docked, silently, the shuttle clinging to the underbelly of the Dominator like a clinging shadow. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the team moved out, each step measured, each breath controlled. The interior of Thrakos' flagship was austere, metallic corridors stretching like the cold veins of some giant leviathan. Security drones patrolled the passageways, their sensors sweeping the silent halls. Alex led the way, a handheld scanner guiding them through the least surveilled routes. They reached the central command room quicker than anticipated. The door loomed before them, formidable and sealed. Lyra set up a portable hacking device, her fingers flying over the controls. Moments later, the door slid open with a silent sigh, revealing the heart of the Dominator. Thrakos stood at the command console, his back to them, oblivious to the danger. He was a towering figure, his armor a mosaic of conquests past, Around him, screens flickered with the status of the ongoing invasions. A symphony of war played out in light and shadow. Without hesitation, the team burst into the room. The element of surprise was complete. The few guards were quickly subdued. Thrakos turned, his face a mask of surprise and fury, reaching for his weapon. But Alex was faster. He lunged forward, tackling the warlord in a move that was all human determination and tactical training. They hit the ground, the impact echoing through the command room. Lyra joined in, her movements a dance of precision and grace, honed by years of defending her world. Together, they disarmed Thrakos, the warlord's rage no match for their combined resolve. As Thrakos lay defeated, the adrenaline of the moment gave way to a profound silence. Alex and Lyra stood, breathing heavily, looking at the tyrant who had threatened their worlds. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck at the heart of the enemy and survived. The return to the Vanguard was a blur, the shuttle filled with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had struck a decisive blow, a turning point in the war for Eldoria and Earth. But as they looked out at the stars, they knew the battle was far from over. The war would continue, but tonight they had won a critical victory, a victory that would echo through the stars, a beacon of hope for all who fought in the shadows. The cold, sterile air of Thrakos' flagship was unlike anything Alex or Lyra had ever encountered. The corridors were lined with harsh, angular metal that seemed to absorb the dim, blue light, casting long shadows that flickered like the dying heartbeats of a distant star. As they navigated the labyrinthine vessel, every step was calculated, every breath measured. Alex adjusted the grip on his weapon, his other hand resting near the detonator tucked in his belt. Beside him, Lyra moved with the grace of a shadow, her senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. Their team, a mix of human and Eldorian commandos, followed in tense silence, ready to engage at the slightest provocation. The plan had been audacious from the start. Board Thrakos' flagship during the chaos of battle, disable its command center, and capture or eliminate Thrakos himself. Intelligence suggested he would be overseeing the battle from his ship, directing his forces with ruthless precision. It was a gambit that required the element of surprise and an intimate knowledge of enemy patterns, knowledge that Lyra's scouts had provided. As they approached the core of the ship, the sound of distant alarms began to echo through the halls. The enemy was aware of their presence. The element of surprise was fading fast. Alex signaled to the group, and they quickened their pace. They reached the command center, a massive chamber dominated by a sweeping view of the space battle raging outside. Amidst the banks of alien technology and glowing holographic displays stood Thrakos, a towering figure clad in black armor, his eyes fixated on the battle before him. Without hesitation, Alex and Lyra burst into the room, weapons raised. The commandos spread out, engaging the guards with a barrage of fire. Alex and Lyra focused on Thrakos, who turned to face them with a malevolent grin. "So, the pests have breached the heart of my ship," Thrakos boomed, his voice echoing ominously. "I must commend your courage, if not your wisdom." Lyra responded with fierce determination in her eyes. "Your reign of terror ends today, Thrakos. Eldoria and Earth will be free from your tyranny." Thrakos laughed, a sound that chilled the blood. Bold words for such frail creatures. With swift motion, he drew a weapon from his side, a strange, shimmering device that hummed with energy. The battle was brutal and swift. Alex and Lyra maneuvered with practiced coordination, ducking behind cover and firing whenever an opportunity presented itself. Thrakos was relentless, his weapon unleashing waves of destructive energy that forced them to constantly shift positions. In a daring move, Alex provided a distraction, firing a series of shots that allowed Lyra to close the distance. With a warrior's cry, she leaped toward Thrakos, her blade drawn. The clash of metal rang out as she engaged him in close combat, her blade a blur of motion against his heavier strikes. Seeing his chance, Alex moved to the side, aiming his weapon with precise care. He fired, hitting Thrakos in a weak spot in his armor. The warlord staggered, caught off balance by the unexpected shot. Lyra used the opening, driving her blade forward with all her strength. Thrakos roared in pain and rage as the weapon found its mark, piercing his armor and wounding him severely. As Thrakos fell, the battle around them began to quiet. The command center was secured, the enemy subdued or eliminated. The team breathed a collective sigh of relief, but their victory was tinged with sorrow. Around them lay the bodies of several fallen comrades, heroes who had sacrificed everything for this moment. Lyra knelt beside one of the fallen, her expression one of deep sadness. "Their names will be honored," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Alex placed a hand on her shoulder, his face solemn. As they prepared to leave the flagship, Alex and Lyra took a moment to gather their thoughts. The battle for Eldoria was over, but the journey to rebuild and unite their worlds was just beginning. They were ready to lead, bound by shared loss, strengthened by shared triumph, and driven by a shared vision of peace. Transitional scene, reflections of change. Back on Eldoria, the aftermath of the battle weighed heavily on Alex and Lyra. In a quiet moment, they stood at the edge of a clearing overlooking the capital city. The sky was streaked with the colors of sunset, a stark contrast to the cold metal corridors they had just left behind. Alex stared at the horizon, his mind replaying the events aboard Thrakos' flagship. "We've won the battle, but the war has left scars that won't heal easily," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and sorrow. Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant buildings. "Our people will need time to heal. Trust isn't built overnight. We've taken the first step, but many challenges lie ahead." Alex turned to her, a determined look in his eyes. "We've faced impossible odds before and prevailed. Together, we can guide our worlds to a brighter future." Lyra smiled, a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "Yes, together." Eldoria's capital, once a city of lush greens and flowing waters, had begun to show signs of change. In the aftermath of the war with Thrakos, the reconstructed skyline bore both human and Eldorian designs. The merging architectures symbolized more than just physical rebuilding. It was a testament to a newfound unity. In the heart of this new district, a large public square bustled with life. Humans and Eldorians worked side by side, laying down cables for an advanced communication network. Above them, children, both human and Eldorian, played among the newly planted Terran trees, their laughter a melody that seemed to heal the scars of war. Captain Alex Morgan walked through the square, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and sorrow. Each joyful shout from the children was a reminder of those who weren't there to witness this peace. He stopped by a memorial at the square's center, a sculpture of intertwined celestial and terrestrial symbols, representing the Alliance. His fingers traced the names of the fallen, carved into the metallic base. Among them was Jorah, his closest friend and advisor during the war. He whispered a promise, one he had made every day since the war ended, to make their sacrifice worth something lasting. Beside the memorial, Lyra stood watching Alex. Her presence was no longer met with suspicion, but with respectful nods and warm smiles. The Eldorian warrior had traded her armor for robes that bore the symbols of peace, an olive branch entwined with her planet's sigil. Approaching Alex, she placed a hand on his shoulder, sharing the weight of remembrance. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she asked, her voice a soft echo in the bustling square. "They play as if the shadows of war never touched this land." Alex nodded. "It's more than I dared hope for, but the true test is still ahead of us." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an engineering team, ready to report on the progress of the new hydro-energy system, a joint technological venture that promised to power the city without harming the planet's ecosystem. The lead engineer, an enthusiastic young Eldorian named Tivon, greeted them with a bright smile. "Captain, Lady Lyra, the system integration is complete. We've adapted human technology to work with Eldorian natural sources. Initial tests are better than expected. We're ready for the first full activation." Lyra looked at Alex with a raised brow.
"Shall we do the honors?"
Together, they followed Tivon to the city's power center, a towering structure of glass and vine, located beside the river that wound through the city. Eldorians believed in visibility. To see the mechanisms of life was to understand and respect them. The center was a marvel of technology and nature, designed to be both efficient and beautiful. At the heart of the building, a large console awaited them. Alex and Lyra each placed a hand on the biometric sensors, a symbolic gesture of their joint leadership. The console hummed to life, screens flickering on to show the flow of energy lighting up sections of the city. Outside, the setting sun cast a golden glow, and as the lights of the city brightened under the twilight, cheers erupted from the square. Watching from a viewing platform, Alex and Lyra allowed themselves a moment of quiet satisfaction. "This is just the beginning," Lyra said, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Alex agreed, "Yes, and much to teach our children. They will grow up in a world where humans and Eldorians share not just a planet but a future." As night fell, they returned to the square, where a celebration was underway. Music, a blend of human tunes and Eldorian harmonies, filled the air. Food stalls offered dishes blending ingredients from both worlds, creating new flavors that were eagerly sampled by all. In the midst of this celebration, Alex and Lyra addressed the crowd, speaking of unity, resilience, and the bright future ahead. The crowd responded with applause, their faces alight with hope. As they stepped down from the makeshift stage, an elderly Eldorian approached them, her face etched with the wisdom of many years. She handed Lyra a small plant, a sapling from a tree that was sacred to the Eldorians. "Plant this in your gardens," she said, her voice carrying the weight of tradition. Together, Alex and Lyra planted the sapling in the soil of Eldoria, under the watchful eyes of their people. It was a small act, but like the turning of the tides, it signified the beginning of a new era, an era born from the ashes of war and nourished by the hopes of peace.